they? Who they all day? Who they? Who they all day?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Flying Pigskin. I'm John Popovich. Over my shoulder in just a second is going to be Scott Kaiser. Tanya O'Rourke isn't feeling well today. She'll be back next week. And Philip Lee, we hope he joins us next week as well. Bengals. Wow, I'll tell you what, this was a tough one, Scotty. I mean, the fact that they were even in this game yesterday was remarkable because I thought Buffalo could have been up 25-30-0 in that first half. I thought when the Bengals split it in half and got to 14-7, I thought they ought to be happy with this.
I honestly thought that they were going to be able to pull it off there, Popo. The way that they picked up momentum there in the second half and ran with it, and all of a sudden the Bills were back on their heels, and it looked like that they were going to be able to go on ahead and secure the victory. But, you know, of course, the Bills ended up making one or two more plays, and that was the difference.
Yeah, it sure was. And that's it. Especially you could see people were cheering and going crazy in that. The Bengals were ahead 17-14, but you knew there was plenty of time left. And but I guess I still held out hope that the Bengals would be able to come back and maybe get that last one in here. The Flying Pigskin podcast happens every Monday, and you could get it by subscribing to Flying Pigskin on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play. First of all, congratulations. Your 49ers 3-0, huh?
Yeah, it was, again, ugly, but I'll take it.
And my Browns are 1-2. But our Bengals are what we're here to talk about, and they are 0-3. Next week, they'll play the Steelers on Monday night. They're 0-3. I guess everybody in the AFC North lost yesterday. That's remarkable to have a whole division go down.
I didn't even think about that until you just said it, but yeah, I guess you did, because the Ravens finally ran into somebody that we hope can challenge the Patriots come AFC Championship time in the Chiefs. So, yeah, it was a rough day for the AFC North fans.
Philip and I were in the locker room yesterday for the game and, of course, after the game. And one of the things I asked Coach Zac Taylor right after the game was, is it easy to explain why such a bad start? Let's hear what he had to say.
Another tough loss. We dug ourselves into a hole there in the first half, which is killer. That's 2 games in a row right now. But again, at some point this stuff is going to pay off. The way that our guys are fighting for each other in the second half. It was dark there. We're on the road, tough environment, down 14-0. Offense wasn't getting a whole lot going even there to start the third quarter, and the defense kept stepping up and making plays for us. And eventually the offense caught up and made some plays and got us in this game. And unfortunately we couldn't finish it off at the end. But again, we're 0-3. It sucks. It feels terrible. But I'm confident that the guys in this room, we're going to get some wins out of this thing. And it's only a matter of time, and they believe in each other. And that's all we can ask for right now. We know we got a big one coming up next week, and we'll be fired up and ready to roll.
Is it hard to explain the slow start?
It's not hard to explain. It's pretty easy to explain. We on offense, really, I thought the defense played well in the first half. They were on the field too long. And, yeah, sure, they gave up a few plays, but they were out there too long. And they weren't getting much from the offense. If we had a first down, it probably came in that 2-minute drive at the end of the half. And so that's just, we put them in a bind. And unfortunately, they held up long enough for us to stick in that game. And then offense in the second half, we generated a little more offense than we had in the first half. And Randy stepped up and made a kick, and just wasn't enough for us to get it done.
Yeah, he talked later, Scott, because that one he was dealing pretty much in generalities there. But later he talked about some specifics, and we tweeted during the game, a few of us, about just there were 13 plays, and they were penalized on 4 in 13 plays. I mean, you almost have to be trying to be penalized to do those sort of things, and they were all different. Everything wasn't motion or anything was offsides or anything like that. It was all kinds of different penalties they were getting hit on, and they all hurt. And every time this team gets penalized a lot, they can't get anywhere. And I guess every team's like that.
I was just going to say that goes for any team. I mean, you can't play against yourselves, as long as you're playing against the opponent too, because you give the other team chances like that, and you bury yourself before you even get going. And that's what happened in that first half. It was almost as if the offense, didn't make the trip until, late in that second half. And then all of a sudden it woke up. But when you're shooting yourself in the foot with penalties all day long, it's tough to get any rhythm and anything going. But in that second half, they finally did. But you would have liked to have seen it in the first half. But credit to the defense, like Taylor said, when you hold a team to 14 points in the first half, I mean, you're not out of the game. It's a 2-score game. And it wasn't as if the Bills were doing anything that made you think, well, gee, it's going to be a long day. We're going to have trouble stopping him. It was just this methodical moving down the field. And, again, the defense held when they needed to. And the offense just couldn't get anything going. But, credit the Bills defense, too. They're a pretty good unit. They're no slouches. But, it's tough when you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, Josh Allen was better than I thought. I hadn't had a chance to see him that much. He has good movement. He throws the ball well. There were times I thought they were going to get him in the backfield, and he was able to escape. He's a young quarterback, and I just hadn't seen him much. Maybe you had.
Well, I saw him a little bit last year, but last year it seemed like they kept the training wheels on him a lot. Didn't let him throw. They limited what he did as far as throwing the ball into coverage. He ran a lot. And then this was the first time I'd seen him this year. I saw some stats, and it suggested that, he's playing within the offense and getting a little bit better. But, yeah, he reminded me of a young Cam Newton back there yesterday. Tough to bring down. He fumbled that one ball and left it on the field, picked it up and, slung it over and ended up getting a 4 or 5 yard gain out of something that could have been disastrous for most QBs. And it's tough when a guy is able to make plays when you seemingly have him sacked. And so, I thought they did a great job, though, for the most part. He had some running plays, but it wasn't really he didn't really do anything that killed you. It was just those, well, we got him. Oh, no, we don't. All right. Well, here we go again, starting over.
Yeah, almost giving you some hope and then taking it away in a hurry.
Right.
One of the guys I talked to after the game was Sam Hubbard, and I think one of the things I talked to him about was Josh Allen. Let's play that.
Yeah, they're a very good team. Josh Allen's a great quarterback. Really hard to bring down. Very elusive with a strong arm. But we did a good job stopping the run, making them kick field goals, and until our offense picked it up in the second half. Because, we never lost faith that they would. And we got to make a couple more plays and finish the game.
Win would have been big. Does the loss mean anything as far as, we came back, we made a game of it?
Yeah, I mean, we're not into moral victories. We wanted that win really bad. But we got a big one on Monday night next week, and we're focused on getting that win.
How tough was it chasing Allen? It seems like he's a big guy. He doesn't look fast, but he moves. He's elusive.
No, he's fast. He ran a 4.7 at the combine. Looked like he was barely even trying. But he's a big guy, very elusive and hard to bring down.
Okay, so that's Sam Hubbard talking a little bit after the games. And I almost felt like it was the same kind of locker room as at Seattle. As we came back, we got close, but we didn't win the game. But, at some point there, Scott, it's like, that's not what we want. We want a W.
Yeah, and obviously nobody wants to go home with the loss. But again, it did feel much more like that Seattle game where despite the fact that they were down, it never felt out of hand or unwinnable. And when they did finally get things going, obviously they took the lead there late, but you see flashes of, hey, if they can replicate that throughout the game, then they won't have to find themselves in such a hole to have to come back. And there's a few things there that they obviously need to get rectified. The running game still is struggling. Mixon hasn't found his stride, and I'm not quite sure exactly what it is. The offensive line I know isn't great, but there seems to be a disconnect between the Mixon we saw last year and the Mixon we've seen so far this year. Yeah, he got going a little bit there in the second half on a couple of those passing plays, but just the ground game in general isn't where they need it to be if they're gonna start closing out some of these games, because Andy Dalton is who he is, and he had the 2 picks, but you're asking him to throw upwards of close to 40 and 50 times a game every week. That's it's going to happen where, he has one of those games where he's throwing picks and things just don't go your way. So there needs to be a better balance. So if they're going to lock down one of these and come away with a victory, they need to figure out the ground attack.
Yeah, Mixon, for the record, 15 attempts, 61 yards rushing. He caught 2 balls, 34 yards, and he got that one touchdown, the little flip off to the right from Andy Dalton. We also talked to Joe Mixon after the game in the locker room. Let's hear what Joe had to say.
It almost looked like you guys found a way to get it done today. And just the end, it didn't fail. What do you think of the second half and being able to turn it around?
It's definitely frustrating as a unit. Put ourselves in the bind and, playing from behind, can't do that. One thing I am proud of these boys, they fought all 4 quarters, especially the defense. They played their ass off for us tonight.
Well, Joe Mixon, after the game, you mentioned, though, he never got going. There were a couple little flashes there. I think he had an 11-yard run, a 5-yard run, and that's about it. And then you see the ageless Frank Gore busting through there, and he had a couple of about a dozen or more. And I saw him after the game. He reminds me of Eric Bieniemy. He's not a big guy, but boy, he just. I remember seeing him play in I think it was the national championship game, Ohio State against Miami, years ago when Willis McGahee got hurt in that game. And I think Gore was the guy that came in and ran so well, or at least was on the roster at that time for Miami. He's been around a long, long time. And he's something else.
That was once upon a time. And obviously I'm very familiar with Gore, and it's
right.
so funny with It's so funny with Gore because it was vintage Frank Gore yesterday in that he's not going to break off huge runs. He's never been a breakaway speed guy, but he hits you with the 3, the 5, here and there. And then all of a sudden in the late goings when you need to just move the chains and you think, all right, well, we've held him all day. Then all of a sudden he busts one for 15 yards, gets the first down, and he just does things that you're like, well, where has that been all day? And you look at the stat sheet and you're like, how did Frank Gore get to almost 100 yards? Mm-hmm. And, it just I can't believe that he came into the league with 2 torn ACLs.
Right.
Wasn't expected to make it to a second contract, and here he is, still chugging away. Once upon a time when he was with San Francisco, I hemmed and hawed. As much as I love him, I didn't quite think he had made it to Hall of Fame. But at this point, there's no way that Frank Gore doesn't make the Hall of Fame with the numbers he's put up.
I got a feeling he's one of those guys, too, that you see him go in baseball all the time. Guys that are recycled for various teams. They're productive, but they're also really good with teammates. The guys love them. And they have a winning aspect about them that guys rally around. He's just senior enough, but he's junior enough to appreciate the young guys and get along with them, but senior enough to get their respect.
And he always finds himself in a position where you think, all right, he's going to be the second or third guy, at this point in his career. But somehow he works his way up to the top of the depth chart by outworking the younger guys or injuries or what have you. There's no reason that at this age, running backs usually don't make it past 30. And, here he is closing in on 40 and still productive. So, he's a great one, and you tip your hat to him. But again, the Bills did what they had to do as far as moving the chains late in the game when they had to. And, credit to them on that touchdown. I thought that the Bengals were going to get another stop. It just seemed like all of the air had left the balloon for Buffalo. And I thought, well, the Bengals are going to seal this one down because the defense had looked so good throughout. And it's just, one last play.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, though. This is the kind of place where the fans pick you up. Maybe you're getting knocked around in that stuff. Philip was with me yesterday in Buffalo, and he texted me right at the beginning of the game. He says, this is louder than Seattle. He says, everybody said Seattle's loud, but this was their home opener. They were really amped up for everything to happen, but they kept it up too. Of course, they had the first half. They're up 14-0. They're keyed up in that stuff, but and it quieted a little bit. But I'll tell you what, these are fans that come out there. They're hardy, blue-collar fans up there in Buffalo, and they were there to support their team. I think that was a big part of bringing their team and getting them back on the right track.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. One of my better friends from college is a huge Bills fan from up there in Rochester. And the only training camp that I've ever been to is a Buffalo Bills training camp back when they had Marshawn Lynch, I think the year after they drafted him. And those fans are more passionate than just about any fans in the NFL. So I can absolutely believe that it was, louder than Seattle because it was their home opener. These guys were coming in 2-0. And you're right. I do agree that it seemed as if despite their struggles there on offense in the second half, the fans did will them to get that one last touchdown to close out the game because all of a sudden the offense started moving the ball where they hadn't in 2.5 quarters.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me, and I all of a sudden I turned to the guy sitting next to me, and I think we were well into the third quarter, and I said, I thought the tight ends were going to be a big factor in this Bengals offense. Yet I looked down at the stat sheet at that time. C.J. Uzomah had been targeted one time, no catches. Tyler Eifert hadn't even been targeted. Nobody else, and it was like, these guys, and he looked at me and he goes, yeah, it's unbelievable. Now, about 2 minutes after that, Tyler Eifert caught that one pass that got them to the 1 yard line. So they must
And it's funny that you mentioned that because I was sitting there thinking, I must have missed where Eifert left the game with an injury because I haven't heard his name all day. There must have been something up. And not shortly after I thought that to myself, he catches that pass over the middle. I'm like, oh, well, there he is. He's fine.
Scott, I had binoculars because they have you sitting kind of on the corner of an end zone. So I picked up the binoculars and I'm scanning the Bengals sidelines for the exact same reason, thinking he must not be playing. He must not be in there. And I'm seeing he's standing there. He has his helmet on. He's ready to go in, and he was in on the next series. I can't tell you how many plays he played, but it's almost like those tight ends weren't a factor at all. Now, he kept going. They seemed like they wanted to get the ball to Auden Tate quite a bit yesterday. And I also think the first half, wind was a factor on the Bengals. It was blowing. They were saying it was 13 miles an hour to begin the game. I think it was worse than that because the flags were really stiff up there and they were blowing. And I think Andy Dalton was having some problems, but I'm not sure what they were trying to do, but it wasn't working. And John Ross misses the first pass that's thrown to him and got everything off to a bad start.
Well, and then he had that fumble, and I was just going to say after we talked about Eifert, I feel like both games so far this season, I haven't mentioned one without the other, and it's just because of injuries and whatnot. And the joke that, all right, well, they made it clean through another game. Well, they made it clean through another game, but bad John Ross showed up in this one with that drop and that fumble, and those were costly. Who knows what happens on that drive? If he doesn't fumble, maybe they get in field goal range because they weren't that far off from where he fumbled it. But yeah, that you can't have a game like that if you're John Ross after the 2 games that they had. And maybe the Bills, keyed in on him. I kept waiting for him to make one of those plays like he's made so far this week this year where he gets behind the defense, and it just seemed like he was never. Either they didn't target him or the Bills made sure that he didn't get behind him. But he was MIA and had that huge fumble that cost him at least 3. So
I saw a stat prior to the game that since the beginning of the 2018 season, the Buffalo Bill defenders have batted down 26 balls at the line of scrimmage. That was 6 more than any other team in the NFL. And I thought to myself, that's not good news for Andy Dalton because he gets a lot of balls deflected anyway. And there were quite a few of those, and I think that probably had a big impact too in where he was going and where he was able to throw. Let's go. We were talking about Joe Mixon. Let's hear what Coach Taylor has to say about Joe Mixon's day and what he was able to accomplish or not accomplish.
I thought that Joe really did a good job. We could tell even in the first half when we didn't have a lot going, we could tell it was close. And fortunately, we were able to keep the game within reach to where we could keep calling those runs in the second half. That was the difference really in this week and last week. Last week, it got out of hand so much. This week, we felt like, okay, we can make these corrections to get it going and did a better job in the second half.
Yeah, a little better job in the second half, but it still never really broke much to make a difference. And they hit Gio Bernard, I think, for one nice little screen pass that got him down the field. But you watch enough NFL video games right now, you see teams that establish the run or at least get somewhere with the run. They could depend on it. The Bengals cannot right now. They're just they seem like a couple 3 yards, and that's about it.
Yeah, and again, when you look at the totality of it, if the teams that they're coming up against are looking at the film and they know, well, they're one-dimensional right now, we'll see if Andy Dalton can beat us. That's not a place that you want to be if you're the Bengals. So they've got to figure out a way to get the ground game going one way or the other. I don't know if they, try to force it early and so that later on things open up or what they got to do. And again, I'm not entirely sure who's it on, whether or not it's just the run blocking not doing great or what it is. They, 2 weeks in a row, they played front sevens that are pretty stout. So, you can chalk it up to that, but it's not getting any easier against the Steelers because they certainly gave the Niners all they could handle as far as the front seven and pressure they were getting. But if you allow the Steelers to sit back and, just stand there in zone coverage, it's going to be a long day for them on offense again. Okay, let's move to that because I'm sure you watched that game. I didn't get to see that at all. So the 49ers and the Steelers, I guess compare and contrast what the Steelers were able to do well that the Bengals weren't able to do against the 49ers. What was the difference in that game that made a pretty close game? Turnovers.
Oh, really? Okay.
They forced 4 turnovers before the end of the first half. And it wasn't anything that you can say, is self-inflicted on the Niners' part. No, the Steelers played really well, and I think I'm assuming that they got challenged this week, knowing that Ben wasn't going to be there. They've got a QB who's starting his first ever NFL game. I'm sure that defense was told, look, we're going to need all the help we can get from you guys, and you guys have got to lock things down. And in that first half, they did. The problem was, you get 4 turnovers, and you think, well, there's not much chance that the other team's going to win, but they didn't convert almost any of those turnovers into points. They got 6 points off those 4 turnovers. If Ben's there, they might have won that thing running away. So, if the Bengals are going to, stay in the game and make sure that they're doing what they need to do, they need to secure the ball at all costs, because I highly doubt that the way Mason Rudolph looked through the first half of the game was much different than the second half of the game. He hit Juju Schuster-Smith with a 76-yard pass, beautiful pass that he got under and ran with all the way to the house. And it was the type of thing that I worried about when you're talking about, all right, Mason Rudolph first start, he's going to have the jitters, but once he settled in, he looked pretty good. So they've got to not take him lightly, and they got to make sure that they secure the ball and don't turn it over. Yeah, that's what I was going to follow up with, is that it sounds like at least the strength they showed, it goes back to the days of, whether you want to talk about the Steelers, have always had that signature of being a defensive team. If you go all the way back to the days of the Steel Curtain, that may be the strength they're playing from right now, especially without Ben Roethlisberger and what the Bengals have to deal with on Monday night. Yeah, and I know that the last couple years there's been a little bit of a slide. Their defense has suffered, the Shazier injury set them back a little bit. They haven't, since Palomalu left, their secondary hasn't been the way it was, and they kind of, they've been rebuilding it on the fly. So it hasn't been that dominant unit that we even saw, 10 years ago. But yesterday, again, it was a unit that, did everything that they possibly could to win that game, and the Niners just found a way. I think if that game had been in Pittsburgh, they win it easily. But, the home field advantage and flying across country and a guy starting in his first game, all those things just kind of added up, and they didn't make enough plays. But I'd be very leery of anybody who thinks, oh, well, they're 0-3, because it didn't look like an 0-3 team yesterday, that's for sure. Zac Taylor talked a week or so ago after the 49ers. It was either before or after the game. And he seemed to point out
that the 49ers are a team that is now together for the most part for 3 seasons under the same coaching staff. And he felt that was a great benefit to those guys. Everybody understood there was a lot less thinking about things and a lot doing. You watched them a lot, and I'm just kind of wondering, thinking of, do you see that maybe through terms of year 1, year 2, year 3, now all of a sudden they do have that ability to come back and win a game?
Yeah, this game that they played yesterday against the Steelers, I would say even last year. Now, last year skewed because Garoppolo went down with that ACL injury, and so it was a struggle through most of the season regardless. But I'd say that last year, even starting out, they lose that game just because they were only in year 2 of the system, still getting their players in. And that's why I keep harping on this whole transition to Zac Taylor, is that you have to look past just what's going on the field right now. You look for small things. You hope they play well, and after 3 games so far, 2 out of the 3 games were winnable.
Right.
And that's kind of all you can ask for at this point if you're a Bengals fan. I know you want W's and you want to see, you don't want to get shut out in halves and all of that. And that's all well and good. But come back in 2 more years and see where this team is at. And if the problems are the same, then start griping, then start complaining, then start wondering if you hired the right coach. But right now, it's just about, it sounds ridiculous when it's at the NFL level, but it's about getting the fundamentals down. Yeah. I mean, they're learning a new system. They're getting new players in. Some of these guys are going to be gone next year, and that's another draft that they're going to bring in more guys that Zac Taylor, approves of. And so, there's just going to be some growing pains, but I feel like so far through 3 games and just what I've heard Zac Taylor say and the way he's operating this program, it seems like they're headed in the right direction. It's the same things that I saw from Kyle Shanahan when he took over, where it was like, all right, your first time as a head coach, what are you looking for? And it's just certain little things. And the way he says, I had to chuckle at that post-game press conference when you asked him my question. He said, losing sucks. And it's like that's a small thing, but having that little moment of levity within something really serious, says a lot to me.
Oh, it does. And I'll tell you what, that's the first time I had seen him come for any kind of a news conference where he had an edge. I could tell he was mad. You and I are fathers. We know about sometimes you deal with things calmly, and sometimes you have to have an edge, and you have to let people know that. And I could see he walked in. He was talking faster. He was talking sterner. He was shorter little words and sentences. The one thing in it, I think alluded to it, is there was a lot of social media in the first half of yesterday about how they looked like they didn't want to be there. They were dead. They weren't playing hard. And you know something? When you can't get an offense going, that is often what it looks like. You're not getting it going. But they did. We would gripe week after week under Marvin Lewis that they made poor halftime adjustments. They weren't able to adjust to the other team. Yesterday, if anything, the Bengals did the adjustment, whether it was a mental adjustment, a physical adjustment, a strategic adjustment, whatever it was, they got the Bengals back into the game yesterday. And that, I thought, was awfully important and should be telling to a Bengals fan that maybe this coaching staff knows what they're doing.
Well, and there's 2 things there to kind of hammer in on. The first part being, I didn't see a team that didn't show up. I mean, some days you're going to face defenses that just don't give you anything. And that Bills defense looked great. And again, they're down 14. I think of when a team, when you say, this team didn't show up, they're just getting beat up and down the field. Had it been 21-0 at halftime, then maybe you're looking at that, again, the Bills offense is just humming. You look at that and say, well, maybe they didn't show up. But a 14-point, a hard-fought 14 points for the Bills. They got that 2-point conversion, and they kicked 2 field goals. Yeah. It wasn't as if they were running up and down the field on them. So it didn't suggest to me that, this is the team that, same old Bengals. It just sometimes you have those days where a team has your number. And then, like you said, in the second half, I think the Bills took their foot off the gas just a little bit, thinking, all right, we're at home. We're the undefeated team. We got in these guys' head. We shut them out. Let's go do it again. They never quite picked up anything on offense. and it allowed the Bengals to get back into it. And then, like I said, you saw that confidence from the Bengals just swell once they got things going. Again, couple plays here and there at the end, they end up losing by 4. But no, not at one point did I think this team is defeated, this team isn't ready, they didn't travel. It's just sometimes you're just not as good as the other team, and that happened to be the case. I mean, oddly enough, we'll see how it goes throughout the rest of the season, but this is 2 road games, and you weren't here last week. I suggested if they played well, like they did, well enough to be on a 4-point loss, maybe this is just a team that's going to fare better on the road because they don't have the fans, getting on them when things don't go well immediately. Because if that game is played here yesterday, the Boo Birds are out at halftime, and who knows where things go. So, maybe this is just a team that it benefits them to be on the road because they don't have to worry about all that noise.
Okay, going on the road next Monday night. Coach Taylor talked a little bit about having to face the Steelers on Monday Night Football a week from today.
We got a big one here in 8 days. And, I said in the locker room, a lot of people in that locker room know a lot better than I do how big this one is coming up, and our guys will be focused and ready to play. And so it gives us a great opportunity to get back on track, and so our guys will be prepared just as they were for this one. We got to start faster, obviously, but playoffs is so far down the road. We just need to win a game, and it starts this week, just having our best foot forward and going to get one.
And it is a battle of winless teams on Monday Night Football. Bengals 0-3, Steelers 0-3. They've played Monday Night Football before, but I can't believe, I'll have to look back at the record books, I can't believe they were ever 0-2, both and 0-3. No way. I mean, the Bengals might have been, but not the Steelers.
Right. I mean, that's rare that you have that between any 2 teams on a Monday Night Football game this early in the year.
Yeah, it is, and it is the Bengals' one chance to be on a primetime game this year. So these guys, the way these guys like to show off anymore, this is big for them. Just mentally, they're going to get fired up for next Monday night.
Yeah, I got to believe that I know that they probably won't be favored on the spread.
No.
But if I was a betting man, I would pick the Bengals to win this game because this is the perfect type of Monday night game where for them. They're both 0-3. The other side doesn't have Ben. This is something I didn't mention against the Niners with the Steelers. They weren't able to get the run game going either, which is very untraditional Steelers. Like, that's usually their MO, is being able to ground things out. And I know Ben, has put on a passing display over the course of his career, but they have always been known as a run-first franchise, and James Conner didn't do anything yesterday. So if the Bengals can do what's been done to them so far through 3 games and shut down the run and make Mason Rudolph beat them, I like their chances against the Steelers. Again, on the road, less pressure from the fans. They don't have all day in the city to, get the excitement and swell. They'll be on the road. I think the Bengals can win this game, and I'd pick them by at least 2 field goals.
Well, before we wrap it up, next week also, as the Bengals are playing the Steelers, the Browns are going to face the Ravens, and these are the teams most people have picked to be at the front of the division. We got to see the Browns last night against the L.A. Rams. Pretty close game. I think the Browns probably impressed enough people that they could stay in it, although Freddie Kitchens lost a lot of fans when he ran a draw play on, what was that, 4th and 9 or something, or 4th and 12? And
4th and 9, not to mention the fact that he tried to pass 3 straight times. I thought it was Pete Carroll back there calling plays in the Super Bowl. He went for it. He tried to pass it 3 straight times right there in the red zone, and you got to run the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's so it's going to be interesting in the division. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens will come back, depending on what their young quarterback is able to do. Next week, our show is going to be on Tuesday, since the Bengals are playing on Monday night. So again, next Tuesday is the Flying Pigskin podcast. Scotty, thanks as always. I sure appreciate you taking the time.
Always, Papo. I enjoy it. It's a favorite part of Monday.
Okay, and hopefully Tanya's feeling better. She's able to join us next week, and I hope you join us every week. Again, this is the Flying Pigskin podcast. You could get